Santa Cruz Toastmasters. I joined the club about a year ago, and when I started, I was terrified of public speaking. Anytime when I had to speak in front of a group in class or in front of anyone at all, I would turn lobster red and then I would shake in my knees, and I almost died of anxiety. And so I wandered into my first Toastmasters meeting, and I was so terrified. But after just a couple months of continuing through this program, everything started to change. I started competing in speaking competitions. I started to speak with more clarity and with more confidence. And the most valuable lesson that I've learned through this club is that all that fear, all that anxiety, and that energy never goes away. But what you learn to do is to harness it and to turn it into something valuable, like enthusiasm for what you're speaking about, which is essential if you're going to communicate your ideas and your research effectively to your friends, to your advisors, to your peers, to the general public. So what we'd like to do today is run you through a semi-standard meeting of what we do every single week. Now, our club is normally 40+ members strong, but we only have a few members here with us today, so people are going to be doubling over on roles. In an average meeting, it's one person per role. So not only do you have the opportunity to say, give a full-blown speech, but you can also participate in the kind of roles where you're introducing people and where you're providing criticism. So in order to move on, I'm going to introduce first our word master. This is one of many roles that we have throughout the meeting, and I'll allow this person to explain what this role entails. This person is an alumni at UC Santa Cruz. She's also a private practice marriage family therapist. She's my personal speaking mentor, Vicki Ascento.
Thank you, Brendan, for that wonderful introduction, and welcome to all of you. Thanks for coming out in the rain. I so appreciate it. One of the roles that we have at our Toastmaster Club is that of word master, as Brendan said. So that is a word that we select, maybe a word that's not so common, and that word is placed in our meeting, and then people are invited to use it. And then that word master counts the word. So today's word is one that no doubt you've heard before, bamboozle. Bamboozle. It means to practice trickery or deception, to mislead or deceive. And in a sentence, it is our intention that no one feels bamboozled at this evening's meeting. So use it often, use it frequently, bamboozle. In any form thereof. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. All right, the next role that we're going to introduce is, which I'll let this person also describe their role, but this is a longtime member of our club. He's performed as the Sergeant at Arms, the Vice President of Education, the President, the Area Governor. He's been Toastmaster of the Year, and he is a friend of all things controversial. David Lombard. Your plan, this is the 1-minute Toastmaster.
So I'm filling many roles. 1-minute Toastmaster generally speaks to the club about areas where they see an area of improvement. So it's would be, if you were in a club, your opportunity to make a criticism or a suggestion to the club at large. Toastmasters has been around since 1928. We have manuals that cover both aspects of Toastmasters, which is two, communications and leadership. So these have been developed since 1928. There's thousands of human lifetimes of cumulative knowledge in these. They're very well thought out. Like I said, Toastmasters is a two-pronged course, communications and leadership, and I believe that these are the most important skills that you can have in your entire life. You'll use them with your children, you'll use them with your spouse, you'll use them in your job, you'll use them when you get a ticket. You'll use them everywhere, and you're going to need to use them in order to defend your thesis. Another wonderful thing about Toastmasters is once you've been in Toastmasters a little bit and you go to some other place, you can plug right into the community, and in that community. There'll be a broad and diverse cross-section of a community, and you'll be able to meet people that you would not be able to meet otherwise, and have the resources of being able to plug into a broad cross-section of the community at your disposal. There's nothing wrong with getting up in front of a Toastmasters and go, I'm here, I'm a polymer scientist, and I'm working with so-and-so, and I could definitely use some friends, and I need a place to stay until my apartment's ready in 2 weeks. You never know, at the end of the meeting, all your needs may easily be filled and then some. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and also thank you very much for coming in today.
The next role that I'm going to introduce satisfies the humorous portion of our meeting. It's important to get out a joke early in the meeting so that everyone can relax and be comfortable speaking. So the person fulfilling that role today is Vicky Asunto.
All right. I'm not going to tell you a joke. However, I am going to invite you to laugh. And that might mean that you're going to have to put your plate down and stand up. Maybe some of you have heard of laughter yoga. And I'm a certified laughter yoga leader. And this means that we can absolutely laugh for no reason whatsoever. We don't really need to have a joke because you know what? Sometimes jokes, I don't get them. And maybe some of you might not get them either. So I'm just going to invite us to imagine that we're on a cell phone. I'm sure all of you can imagine that, holding it, or you've got the Bluetooth in your ear. And you have just heard the most funny joke.
Very good. Yay! Very good. Very good. Yay!
And now you've all just experienced laughter yoga. And we don't necessarily do laughter yoga in our club all the time, but it does encourage people to laugh. And certainly when you're going through any stressful times in your life, laughing always helps. Maybe not at the time with the person, but laughing loosens it up, you know, and if you're having a final exam or exams or stress, just laugh for no reason whatsoever. Thank you.
Wow, I did not know that laughter yoga existed.
No.
All right. For the next portion of our meeting, I'm going to make a change to our schedule, and I'm going to let you know that there's a critical portion of our meeting where we have people fulfilling roles, and their purpose is to evaluate our meeting in different ways. And so we're going to fill you in on what those roles are a little later in the meeting. And instead, I'm going to get right into introducing our speaker. Now, when I went to my first Toastmasters meeting, I wasn't sure quite what to expect. And within a couple minutes of arriving, I learned that the theme of the meeting was drugs. And I thought, okay, what is this going to be about? And then I heard the next speaker give a wonderful speech about his experience of using LSD. Now, Ray is a clinical psychologist. He's been a psychologist at a counseling psychologist at this university for 16 years. And so he was attempting to branch out and understand the perspectives that his clients had by using hallucinogenic drugs. And so I left from this meeting having this appreciation for these people. I thought, wow, they must be so incredibly open-minded and so intelligent. And so with that, I'd like to introduce one of my favorite speakers, members of our club, Ray Charlotte.
Thank you, Greta. I just want to correct something. Drugs happened while I was in grad school.
Aww.
Not after I got here. Although there were plenty of drugs here when I got here.
Oh.
But I want to tell you this evening about one of the worst days of my life, and it happened while I was a grad student. It was horrendous. I was a grad student in clinical psychology at Pepperdine University in Los Angeles, and I had been awarded a scholarship which allowed me and paid me to counsel students at the Boys Club in Hollywood. This was before they had Boys and Girls Club, it was just Boys Club. As part of my work, I was expected at the end of the semester to speak to the Rotary Club. They were putting up the money for this scholarship. So they invited me. It was really more of a, you will come to our luncheon and talk to us. So there I was at this Rotary luncheon, up on a stage in front of a large, large room full of people I did not know and had never met. I tried to warm things up a little by telling jokes from one of my favorite comedians. It bombed. Don't ever try to use somebody else's jokes, especially if you don't know how to deliver them. Nobody laughed.
Oh.
I started choking up. I was perspiring. I was sure that my armpits were drenched. I thought, well, maybe if I grab the microphone and move around a little bit, I'll loosen up. My hands were sweating so much when I grabbed the mic, it fell out of my hands.
Oh.
On the floor, broke. They had to bring out another mic. I wanted to die. I was hoping I could just pass out and wake up the next day in an intensive care ward somewhere and totally have amnesia for what was happening. It was horrendous. I swore at that moment, I will never speak in front of an audience again. Whew. It was horrible. However, some years later, I discovered Toastmasters. Thank God. I want to share with you some tips, which, had I known them, could have really saved my butt. Just a few simple tips. Okay. Number one, I'm going to make sure I get this right. Number one, know your purpose. Your purpose is like a target, like a bullseye. Somewhere here, oh, here it is. You just want to draw a bullseye to emphasize that point. So a bullseye is a series of concentric circles. I'm thinking of bullseye, for example, in an archery range. Your bullseye guides everything you're going to do. Your target helps you aim your speech. You need to know your purpose. It's like a target. Now, I know that the kinds of speeches you're going to be giving, the kind of talks you're going to be giving, may have many different purposes. For example, you may be, very commonly, sharing the results of your current research. You may be reporting on someone else's research. In both cases, you're probably talking to some peers, some professors, some fellow colleagues. They have a background of knowledge in what you're talking about. That's one kind of talk. What if you're asked to go out into the community? Maybe you're going to be invited to the Rotary Club in Santa Cruz. Don't worry, it won't be like my experience. But that's a different audience. You need to be able to know your purpose. Your purpose might be to inform. It might be to amuse. Maybe your purpose is going to be to introduce a keynote speaker at a conference, or just to warm up the crowd. So know your purpose, number one. Now, I was unclear about my purpose. I thought, oh, I should be funny, but I need to inform them. I didn't do either one well at all. Number two, key point number two, know your audience. Know your audience. I've alluded to this already in what I just said. An audience of your professional peers or your academic peers is very different than an audience of lay people. Last Friday night, I was down at the, what's that auditorium right by the beach boardwalk? Coconut Grove. And the Chamber of Commerce was honoring their Man of the Year. The Man of the Year is David Hausler from your campus. David and his family are friends of my wife and I. We got to sit at their table. David can speak to many kinds of audiences, and Friday evening, I heard him speak to an audience composed of community business people. Just a little bit. about his work in the lab. It's very different from when he's speaking to other people in the field of bioinformatics. Know your audience. I didn't know my audience at all. I'd never been to a roaming meeting. I hadn't taken time. I could have gone and visited in the months before I had to be there. Who are these people? What do they do? What's their background? Oh, I didn't have a clue. Another thing that can help in knowing your audience is if you actually meet a few people in the audience, and then you can look for them in the audience. You know, it's so helpful. You can connect with somebody and say, oh yeah, there's the person I shook hands with before I walked in. Just that little bit. Connecting that way with people makes such a big difference, and I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. The third key ingredient, you might think it's the most important, but I think they're all three very important. It's to know your material.
Yes.
Know your material.
Yeah.
How? You go over it. You write it out. You know, I wrote this speech out. I read it a number of times, but then I prepared a little briefer outline, and you just keep doing that, refine it. And the nice thing about using an outline, if you need to, which I do from time to time, is you can carry it with you. You can move around the room. You're not rooted at the lectern or the podium. So know your material. Read it, get comfortable with it, rewrite it, time it, see if it flows for you. It's got to work for you, you know. I realized that there is an academic language, and it's specific to each of your fields. And granted, when you're speaking to your professional peers, they expect to hear that language. So you need to know it and be comfortable with it. And of course, as you continue in your grad program, you become more and more comfortable with it. But then you also need to be able to speak the language of the community so that you can communicate with those people too. So know your material. Now, 4 or 5 little tips just to help your speech and speechifying go better. Have 3 to 4 main points, if possible. I realize in some of your speeches that may not be possible because you have so much you need to cover. But ideally, you'll have 3 or 4 main points and some supporting material to help people remember those points, to help drive those points home. Secondly, have your hands and arms free. The big mistake beginning speakers make is, you know, they'll do, we call this the fig leaf position. You know, or I guess this is the reverse fig leaf, where you're kind of hiding your hiney. But either way, you're kind of immobilized, and it's a sign of an uncomfortable and a less experienced speaker. I'm not saying the world's going to end if you do that. For God's sake, it's okay, but let your hands, if you can, let them come on out here. Don't worry, the arms are not going to fall off. There are no recorded instances of people's arms falling off. So you don't have to have your hands in your pockets. That's another big mistake. Because the tendency is to jiggle or scratch or do other rude things. You just don't want to do that. Let your hands be out here. Let them move. You don't want to flail them, but let them move. And you can use them to emphasize things. You can say, first of all, you know, and then next, and you can even use your body. You can add emphasis. Or you can say, you know, this is really important. And just this gesture or something like that really adds to the emphasis. It's like you're adding a visual aid to your speaking. Another thing, which I've been trying to demonstrate here, is to look at people. Now, sometimes you have the luxury of being in a large hall, it's dark, the lights are on you can't see a soul. Well, if that happens, actually I don't think that's a luxury, I think that's unfortunate. But if that happens, fake it. Pretend you're looking at people. But if you don't have to pretend, if you can actually see the people, try and find people in different parts of the room. Now, again, beginners, I've made the mistake too of just kind of sweeping my eye over the room and kind of looking out the window. Much better to find someone in one area of the room, look at them, make eye contact. Find someone in another area of the room, make eye contact. And then another area of the room, make eye contact. The benefit of that is it will give everyone in the room a feeling that you've looked at them, even though maybe you've only looked at 4 people specifically. It's just a little tip, a little trick. Why? Because people hear you better when they feel connected with. It makes a big impact when people feel they're connecting with you. Here's one that you already know. I'm sure you know this, but I'm going to say it anyhow. When you're using PowerPoint, which you will, of course, be doing, don't read the text on the PowerPoint. Oh my God, I hate it. People hate that. It's insulting. Everybody can read, especially the audiences you're speaking to. Now, be appropriate. Obviously, if you're talking to some high school kids and you're using words they wouldn't know how to pronounce, read the words. But for your audiences, for the most part, use your words, not to read the PowerPoint, but to emphasize. Talk about, what was interesting. As I was doing this research with this class of freshman psych majors, a couple of fascinating things happened. That's not written on your PowerPoint, but you're adding something to it. Add value with your words. They'll read the data, they'll read the words. Use your voice to underline, to highlight, to accentuate what's on the PowerPoint. And finally, last tip, have a good close. Think about your close. Here's what I think about. What do I want people to leave with? And then recapitulate. Hit your key points again. What's the take home, the takeaway? What I want you to leave with tonight is that you do not have to go through my utterly disastrous experience in public speaking. You do not have to do that. There's so much help available. I want you to take away the 3 key points. Remember your purpose. You can also light it in your palms. Remember your audience, who you're speaking to, and really know your content, the information that you're delivering. And if you do all that, you will actually have fun. And you'll enjoy sharing the material with people because you feel prepared. You know that you're connecting with people. I'm having fun, and I'm delighted that I got to be here with you tonight. Thank you. I wanted to just mention one quick thing. Totally random thought, but some of you have heard this already. Today is the 150th anniversary of one of the most famous speeches, Gettysburg Address. It's really interesting. And he said, people will not long remember our words, but we do remember.
Thank you, Ray, for an amazing and helpful speech. The next portion of our meeting is that of an evaluator. And what an evaluator does, first of all, they will not bamboozle our speaker, first of all. Secondly, they will give helpful points, feedback on what they liked about the speech, and points of where our speaker could improve. So now let me welcome back up Mr. David Lombard.
407 years ago, our fathers brought forth to this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. I had to learn an entire Gettysburg Address when I was like 5th grade. I still remember it to this day. I'll get into it. This is a bit impromptu. I get to use notes. But I will say, right off the bat, Ray had captivated your audience. He spoke boldly. He used body gestures, hand gestures. He spoke to people. He got out there, gathered your attention, just grabbed it up. It was beautiful. And he did it with a personal story. That allows for him to have a connection with you and for you to have a connection with him. You know something about him, about his past. It's funny, we feel like if people knew our past, they wouldn't like us so much. But actually, when people know our past, they can identify with areas in their lives, and there's actually a much stronger connection. And he swore he was never going to speak in public again. Are we lucky or what to have him here with us tonight? This was a masterful speech. He gave his 3 or 4 points really powerfully. And those are critical to almost any speech, that you don't ramble, you make your key points, and he wove it into a personal story. He did, however, turn his back to the audience at one point, which is kind of a no-no. If you're gonna have a bullseye, you just go like that and you gesture to it. Could have used the word of the day, but he wasn't trying to bamboozle you. Could have, okay? Gotta have some fun with it. You gotta try to work that stuff in there, whatever it is that's going on in the context of the room. You never really know. There was a show from way before I was born when you used the word of the day, chicken came down and you won the prize. Was that spot? Groucho Marx show. It was way before my show.
Okay.
You play with a pen a little bit, and you do want to have your hands free. It's tempting to like play with something when we're a little nervous or stuff like that. You want to have your hands free and not be distracted with anything. And he's masterful enough that he referred to his notes a little bit. Might have had something big and bold just sitting there where you could glance down at it and not that they could use it. But he did have a masterful use of the props. He used the props to show that he had prepared for this speech. He did it, wrote it all out verbatim, then had an outline, and he used those as the props to demonstrate that he'd done the work. He knew his material, and he knew his audience. He was speaking to you to prepare you for the basic foundation of what public speaking is about, and it is knowing your purpose, what it is you like, the ideas or the information you like to convey, to who you are going to be conveying it to structure it to them, and to know your material. It was masterful the way you did that, and the part that I really liked the best about it is that you wove it once again into a personal story, Ray.